So Andrew, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? I'm trying to resist the temptation of waving on these things. So after reading a pretty scathing article about waving on Zoom, why would you wave on Zoom when you don't wave at people and this kind of thing? So yes.
Yeah. Do you know what? I read that same article, and my reaction was, I really don't care. So because genuinely, like, we're not face to face, so you wouldn't physically wave face to face. But if someone's from a distance, someone afar, you'd wave, right?
Yeah, Alan.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'm going to continue waving, and I'm not going to apologise for it, mate. I think this is my way.
Fair enough. That's fair enough.
Cool.
Good stuff.
So
welcome to everyone. I think we've got a few people coming in. So hi guys, I'll give you a wave after Amit's instructed that we're allowed to wave. Welcome to the Digital Growth Show. I think we are now episode 19. Is this 19?
It is.
No, 19.
I wonder if that joke gets. Actually, no. I did get kind of universal kind of acceptance, although it was about 30 years ago, Andrew. So.
Yeah, well, you know me, very, very relevant. My cultural references are very up to date. So you know, it's very up to date. But yeah, no, welcome guys. I think when Amit and I first spoke about doing this show way back when, it was, and you know, we obviously envisaged it kind of continuing, but 19 weeks in, I guess we didn't think we'd still be sitting here currently with a bit of a COVID cloud over us. So you know, it's good that we can kind of continue, and happy that. Obviously, you guys are joining us every week. We get some regular viewers now, which is super cool. And we also get kind of new people joining as well. And we get obviously post show, and now we're starting to see the increase on listenership as well. So some people that don't get to see our glorious faces, Amit, also get to listen on our podcast, and you can find that over on Apple and Spotify, etc.
Awesome. And mate, look, very good start. Thomas says that he actually got your joke. It's a bit sad.
Excellent.
It was many.
Well, Thomas has just decided to age himself.
I know, exactly. Just outed himself to everyone. But well, we've just done that possibly.
Perfect. So I know you're usually super excited about kind of the show. I'd be interested to know on a level of kind of 1 to 10 how excited you are about this week, because obviously we're potentially talking about a topic that would appear to be not as exciting, let's say, as search engine ownership or lead generation or funnel, but I think kind of, if not possibly, one of the most important topics we've spoken about.
Yeah, so look, me being me, I was actually still pretty excited about this, but what I wasn't convinced about was whether anyone would actually join us on the show today. Because in all honesty, you know, data isn't, you know, the sexiest show in the world, you know, especially when we'll be focusing on sort of metrics and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, thanks again. Very sad, but yeah, it is what it is. And like I said, I'm comfortable with the whole waving on Zoom thing, and I'm comfortable with data, so I think we're good.
Excellent. So I mean, look, big topic, right? You know, I mean, we only kind of, you know, pull these in for an hour. That's usually seems to be our kind of session now. But I mean, potentially, I mean, this is you could run a whole series around data. And obviously, what we tried to do today is kind of give everyone a bit of an overview. As always, if you're new to the show, drop in a question at the bottom in the Q&A, run in the chat. Due to some quite substantial technical difficulties, I can't actually see the chat or anything. So there could be a whole host of things, questions that you would ask me, Amit, today, and I would blissfully just oblige, not knowing what the real information was coming through. But
amazing.
Yeah, I guess where do we want to start, mate? Where do you want to kind of tee off, as it were?
Okay, I mean, so perhaps we start where we started when we were kind of thinking about what that show topic was going to be this week. And I think initially we were, you know, we played around with a kind of number of different ideas. But data and metrics is one of those things which we talk about in every meeting. everyone who comes and approaches us and says, look, we want to work with you guys, perhaps the first questions we ask are pretty much related to data and metrics and what's kind of being measured. But it's just something that we never really focus on from an actual conversational piece, right? It's always a byproduct of a conversation that happens. And I guess from that perspective, it's really important, but perhaps just gets overlooked. And I think, you know, from my experience, and I'd be really interested to hear yours, is, you know, when I'm speaking to people, when I'm asking them questions in the digital world, right? We're not going to ask, you know, too many things about balance sheets and P&Ls and stuff like that initially, but it would be when we are talking in that digital world, what we are, you know, the kind of answers we get to some of the questions are often pretty strange. And you'd almost kind of class strange as perhaps irrelevant at times. And that's where I thought, you know what, it might make sense if we do kind of almost try to unify data, try to identify, you know, important metrics based on the different areas of digital marketing, and perhaps even guide people as to where they can access this data, right? So you don't, you know, often, you know, you need an agency for all of this stuff if you kind of know where to look, perhaps. And there are certain things that you may need an agency for, but again, we'll touch on those as well, just for a kind of more rounded conversation. But yeah, I don't know, what was your kind of take on it? Because I was actually expecting full resistance from you, because, you know, like, you're quite excitable, and I just wasn't sure if I was going to get you excited when I said, "Hey, Andrew, we're going to talk about data this week."
No, I think obviously, if we kind of go back and we say that 30 years ago, you know, the kind of cultural reference, you know, there wasn't a lot of data to talk about then. And if I go back kind of, let's say 20 years, when I kind of first started getting involved in digital space, there really wasn't a lot of data available to you. So you were using kind of traditional methods. When you're out there and you're being, you know, commercial, you were selling, you know, or marketing products and services for different people. There wasn't a lot of, I'd say, science. There was a lot of process, but there wasn't any kind of real metrics attached. And I think over the years, you know, in our space, from the kind of sales and marketing perspective, some of those numbers, you know, some of them were focused on and were not relevant. Others were ignored and were highly relevant. So I think if you go back to things like, you know, billboards that you see on the road, well, this number of cars drive past the billboard. Okay, cool. But they're watching the road, right? They're not watching the billboard. You know, magazines, newspapers, we've seen this kind of evolution of almost, I don't like, irrelevant data. You know, as far as, well, my magazine is distributed to this many people. Okay, but how many people are actually reading it? I mean, what do we actually know? And I think what the shift has been is just the amount of data that we can track now, and then obviously what we can do with that. So yeah, as much as I'd say a few years ago, I was kind of more of, that scares me. I think now it just empowers me. And it empowers, you know, everyone to make better decisions. It empowers people to understand what's really happening and give us real information and real feedback, most of the time in real time. So then you can kind of start to use this data. So I'd say, yeah, not fearful, but yeah, genuinely excited about kind of running through some of these data points, some of these metrics, and I think also back to that relevancy. You know, I kind of, it's comical sometimes when you hear still, you know, people talking about, you know, traffic under a billboard. I mean, that's just, and, you know, so I think the thing is that, especially now, people are really trying to identify their return on investment. They're trying to see, you know, every dollar, dirham, pound, euro counts. So where should they be spending this? And a lot of the time, this should be a data-driven decision, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think today especially, I think the reality is that if you can understand what parts of your marketing spend or whatever investments you're making in that kind of digital space, if you can understand what's generating revenue for you, then that's perhaps an opportunity to save money, right? So again, there's a lot of people who are cutting budgets out there. We're having, we're hearing from clients and prospects who are saying the same thing, that last year my budget was X, this year it's going to be Y. What can I do? Is there anything I can do? And I think they almost don't need to ask those questions if they knew where they're, which parts of advertising were generating revenue. And there's a ton of old quotes about, where, which parts of my advertising make money for me and which parts don't and all that. Today I think it's a case of, look, if everyone's just got the right tools, and even if they don't know exactly what's generating revenue, I think people are, today, digitally intelligent enough to be able to say, right, I know this is having an impact, even if I perhaps can't draw a straight line between maybe that piece of content and, a signed contract, right? But yeah, so no, I agree with you.
I also think that some of the kind of lack of understanding, and perhaps we can blow through some of these myths today, or lack of exposure to that shift, right, in data, contributes to kind of some individuals that are clearly blissfully unaware of actually data that they're tracking. I sat with a client a week ago, and I said, let's dig into your kind of Google My Business listing, and discovered that last month, their images had been viewed over 36,000 times. Now they've been focusing, 36,000 times. There'd been 1,500 go-to for the map to drive to their location, and up until that point, their focus had been heavily on Instagram. I haven't got enough followers. Not enough people are liking me, right? Not enough people are seeing this. And I'm like, 36,000 views on your images in Google. So I think also sometimes there's some misplaced faith in other numbers because we spoke a bit about this last week, but it seems to be a growth show theme about the sexiness of things. Perhaps analytics associated to web traffic or engagement or time spent on site is just not as sexy as a like on Instagram.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you do kind of you hit the nail on the head there, but for sure. Andrew, should we crack on? Because so guys, look, just to give you a bit of context in terms of how we're going to play this out today. Again, when we're talking about a topic like this, we want it to be I was going to say exciting, but realize that's going to be a challenge. But what we are going to try and do is really kind of just focus on different areas and different channels within digital marketing, and then just break each of those down very kind of quickly, very swiftly, focusing on the key points and giving you insights as to where you guys can find that data from as well, right? So again, like I said, you don't necessarily have to phone your agency. But you should have access to a lot of this kind of data and information, and there might be bits which you don't, but that's fine as well, because again, that's something that you can look at in the future. But
I think, or if it's me,
okay, we're fine, Andrew.
Okay. We're back.
Okay, cool. So let's start with. Should we start with a website, right? So again, one of the things that we say is has got to be the foundation of everything you do digitally. It has to be your own website. It's an asset that you own. But which parts of kind of website data are important, and which are the tools? So I think, Andrew, if I kind of mention a couple of the tools which I say I would use kind of religiously, okay, just to kind of understand exactly what is going on the Nexa website, for example, or for a client site. The first of these is Google Analytics, which I'm sure everyone's kind of heard of and maybe played around with in the past. But in Google Analytics, Andrew, what are the things that we're looking for? The key points, because there's a ton of information on there, right? And again, very easy to get kind of lost in that information. So if you log on to Analytics, what kind of data is important for you?
Yeah, so I guess obviously there's a whole host of different data points, as you mentioned on there. I think it does depend on the client who we're kind of having a conversation with, and obviously the KPIs associated to a particular engagement. But things like understanding essentially the traffic, right? So looking at and trying to understand where is that traffic coming from. That may be geographically. So where is my traffic coming from, regionally or globally? So I remember years ago looking at some data traffic for an oil and gas company where it really was, there was a whole host of activity around Houston, then a whole host of activity in Abu Dhabi, then Indonesia, and it was very kind of hotspot driven based on obviously the oil and gas business at the time, and seeing what that was there and showing that to the client. They were kind of blown away as far as, well, okay, that makes sense. That's my traffic, you know, these individuals are interested. So I'd say geographical point, obviously understanding where that traffic is coming from, the volume of traffic, so, you know, the growth of it over time. So obviously, you know, the ability to see an instant snapshot, but then ultimately see how that traffic has grown or dropped during that time. And then obviously the ability to do year-on-year comparisons as well, which I think is very interesting at the moment, obviously during COVID as well, to see that comparative data and see where this data is coming from. Also things like, you know, time spent on site. So, you know, is the traffic coming into your site? Are they, you know, finding ultimately what they're looking for? Are they taking the time to browse? Are they taking the time to understand your site? And then ultimately, you know, the kind of bounce rate then linked to that. So, you know, if you've got people coming on the site on there for a couple of seconds, bounce straight out, obviously something's not quite right. So I think when I first dive into Google Analytics, those are the kind of first couple of areas, and ultimately also just device. So, you know, where is that coming from, as far as mobile, desktop, and tablet, and then probably lastly is just source. So actually, where is your traffic coming from, right? You know, is it social? Is it direct? Is it search? You know, and obviously a lot of this would be impacted on the campaigns that you're doing away from the site. So if you're running a paid campaign, or if this traffic is all organic, right? I mean, that's obviously just, I'd say that would be where the majority of people would kind of dive into. So I mean, yeah. where do you kind of start to, you know, take a deeper dive into that, mate?
So I think if you you know, if you do start to see all of those metrics and start to kind of measure and compare the data, you know, based on source, based on traffic growth, all of those things, I think that's fine. In analytics, and a lot of kind of new accounts we take on, we find things like goals aren't set properly in analytics as well. So the kinds of goals that people typically want to look at are, you know, maybe number of leads generated or conversions if it's an e-commerce component in there. We like to take goal tracking a little bit more. Okay, we want to also track things like I don't know, subscribers, for example, right? How many people have subscribed for the newsletter? How many people have downloaded perhaps an ebook? We have a ton of those things on our website, so that's always a nice kind of source of kind of data which we don't perhaps class as leads. And then the other things that I think are important is event tracking, right? So how many people are looking or clicking at the phone number? How many people are clicking on an email address? How many people are engaging with those things? Because again, we can track all of that. And again, you start to then get a kind of richer picture of exactly what your website is doing and what it isn't doing, perhaps. And if it's doing it, how do you get people to do more of it? And if they aren't doing it, then what needs to be changed, right? And that doesn't really need kind of deep analytics or deep investigation at times. A lot of the times you can just look at it and say, okay, but that doesn't perhaps smell right. What do we need to change? Yeah. And you can fix that. And so I agree with you. So I think we covered it there, to be honest with you. Traffic, you know, engagement in the sense of bounce rates, you know, Google do class website engagement as a metric. So if people are coming onto your site for 2 seconds and bouncing off, there's a chance that Google might look at that data and say, do you know what, this site doesn't seem very good because people aren't finding what they need and they're bouncing off. And that might impact things like search rankings and obviously have an overall impact on your traffic as well. You know, so those kind of things are also important. But there's another Google tool which a lot of our clients, and when I say a lot, perhaps even 80% of them when I speak to them, they've never been on. Probably 50 or 60% of those have never even heard of it. And that tool is Google Search Console. And for me, that's a real kind of gem of a tool. And the reason
I mean, what are the kind of things that, you know, you're looking for in there? What can this Google Search Console do for us then? Yeah,
so basically it's the insights of what's going on in inside a Google search engine with respect to your website. Okay, I think it's probably the best way of saying it.
Yeah.
And what that essentially means is, whereas Google Analytics tells you, okay, look, here's the traffic, here's where the people are, you know, and this is perhaps where they're clicking, you know, here's the entry pages, here's the exit pages. What Search Console really kind of digs into more is really keywords, and you start to get a whole load of kind of different kind of metrics, not just on the keywords that are driving traffic to your website, but also keywords that perhaps should be driving traffic to your website that aren't.
Right.
Okay, which I think, you know, so again, a lot of this data, when you're looking at it, you need to kind of look at it from a kind of, okay, what's it telling me and what's it not telling me? And if it's not telling you something, try and understand why, right? There's always a why question you can keep asking yourself when it comes to this kind of stuff. But for example, if you're seeing that you've got a web page, and in Google's eyes, okay, it's a high quality web page, it seems to be ranking, that's where you, on Search Console, you can start to dig much deeper and say, okay, right, it's ranking, but what keywords is it ranking for? If it's ranking for those keywords, what's my click-through rate from those specific keywords, right? So if you've got, and it's really cool. I played around with this actually just from Nexa site on a Saturday night because I was bored a few weeks ago, and it was really eye-opening because we're ranking really well for a ton of different keywords.
Yeah. But
I looked at it and I said, okay, for this page here, which every keyword I do for that kind of service line, we rank number 1. Okay. Now, where am I not ranking in the top page? And literally was going through and checking keywords. And then I was checking, okay, I've got those keywords that perhaps aren't kind of driving me traffic, but actually Google's telling me there's 2,000 people out there who are using that specific keyword or key phrase. How do I kind of convert that into more traffic for our site? And it really was as simple as look at those keywords, go back onto the web page that I wanted to rank for that, do a find of text on that page. And it was literally, okay, I saw very quickly that the keywords that was important to Google weren't actually on my page. Even though I was talking about that same topic, there's just a couple of keywords that were missing. So 5-minute job, literally just went through the text, added in some of those keywords, changed a couple of the headers. The next day we were on page 1, right? And that was from page, I think 3 or 4, actually, I think we were there. And then over the last week, we're now in position 2 or 3, right? And again, it was a very kind of quick job. I mean, it was SEO, but again, not technical in any way. It was just looking at some data and saying, okay, well, that's an opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, and again, Search Console is just, it's a real kind of gem of a tool where actually you don't need much training, but if you did, and you wanted to kind of understand a little bit more about, okay, what do I need to do as a starter? There's so many, you know, YouTube videos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where it will just show you, hey, this is what's important, log in, this is how you look for keywords, this is how you can do this. And it works really well. And I think one of the other nice metrics that it gives is real kind of engagement on a per page basis. So if you do have, you know, a 200, 300 page website, I've seen somebody on there who I know has got who's watching the show today, who I know has got about 2,000 or 3,000 pages on their website. But again, you know, it's really important you understand actually the validity of each of those different pages, right? What's working, what isn't working, and you know, it just gives you a bit of a task list, or gives your team a task list in terms of, okay, let's look at that, let's tackle this strategically, and let's try and kind of, you know, generate more organic, you know, free traffic on the back of it. You know, again, it's a very kind of COVID recession friendly approach, but it works.
So console, Search Console is kind of part of analytics. Once you've embedded analytics into your site, it's kind of available to use because it's tracking, yeah?
Yeah.
And I guess we should say that, I mean, it is quite frightening. It's not just the smaller organizations. I've kind of stepped into an enterprise level banking client that didn't have any Google Analytics on their site. And it was kind of like, you don't have Google Analytics. And the guy was laughing, going, no, it's incredible, isn't it? So it's kind of, I think but it is very simplistic to a couple of lines of code. And then obviously once that's embedded on the site, you know, you can at least start to use these tools. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's, so we obviously Google Analytics, Google Search Console, free tools. You should already have access to these if you've got analytics on your website. Honestly, play around with them, and I think once you kind of do start playing around with those, it's really interesting. There's a feature on Google Analytics where if you want to lose half an hour of your life, literally click on a real-time section and it will show you exactly what people are doing on your website right now, this second, where they're from, what pages they're on, and yeah, for geeks like
only
me,
30 minutes,
it's fascinating.
Yeah?
Only 30
minutes.
minutes. Yeah,
only
so
30 minutes.
the best way of explaining that, I guess, is it's the TikTok for geeks, right?
Brilliant.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, you definitely need to work for Google Analytics marketing department for sure.
Yeah. So look, I think just we're going to move off websites in a second, but one area or one other tool that I kind of recommend you guys play around with, and I think you can do it from the free version, so again, doesn't cost any money. But HubSpot is really good for additional data and breaking down that data, so it's sometimes more digestible, manageable. So like I said, you might get lost in analytics or you might get lost in Search Console, but in HubSpot, they kind of almost do this automatically where they pull out the key metrics that are kind of really important, just so that it, again, focuses you on understanding what's important versus what's not, right? It's easy to get lost in my traffic's increasing by 30% month on month, but if that traffic actually isn't generating any more business for you or isn't generating any additional leads for your business or sales, well, how relevant is that traffic, right? And again, tools like HubSpot can kind of really help you to just make that distinction between actually what's good and what's not. And the kind of stuff I look for in HubSpot is stuff like the leads, and not just leads as a whole, but leads by service, leads generated by web page. So actually which web pages are generating the most leads. And again, you use that to figure out if you've got poor performing pages, what do you do? If you've got really good performing pages, how do you get them to perform even better? And then for me, the last piece of this is things like the user journey. So I love seeing things like how many pages did somebody visit before they became a lead? And I also really like seeing, okay, how many pages did they visit before they become a customer or client of ours? Because really super interesting numbers, because the second you know that actually a really good lead who turns into a customer actually goes on 40 pages of your website. And for us, it's about 35 right now. The second somebody goes on 2 pages, fills out a form, that actually the likelihood of them converting into a customer is pretty weak because they just haven't done enough research on our website. And once you start kind of understanding that, it impacts all different parts of, our kind of internal processes. So like I said, quite cool data like that. And then I guess the last piece is just that first interaction on the website, last interaction, and understanding what happens kind of thereafter. But so I think from a web perspective, I think we covered it, Andrew. Anything else from your side there?
Just I think just some of the kind of other things to consider. We haven't really spoken about apps, but this kind of goes across apps and web. There are tools out there that will, record user journey, right? So there's tools like Hotjar and Specklet that basically will record in real time. They'll apply heat maps to usage on pages, and actually record real time sessions. And that's the same for web and from an application perspective as well. So using that data to effectively, make data-driven decisions around how you may want to creatively, present yourself as an organization. I had a call yesterday with somebody who said, I don't like my website. I was like, what don't you like about it? Well, I don't like this blue bit on top. Okay, cool. So, does anyone know what that blue bit is or what it does? Are you tracking it? Are you understanding it? No, I just don't like it. So I think the thing is that with some of these user tracking tools, you can start to remove emotion from decision. Okay, so you can really start to dig into what's working, what's not working. Are your visitors to the site? So you may be tracking that you're getting the right visitors They're spending a fair bit of time on there, but you may not be converting. So what's happening is there a kind of disconnect somewhere? Is there something that is kind of proved faulty, or, you know, and especially when we're doing some of that heat mapping, you really kind of see cold areas where you would ultimately think that actually, you know, that should be white hot, that particular button or that particular call to action, you know, should be white hot, but it isn't. Why? So then it kind of goes into looking at some of that A/B testing and trying to understand how that traffic is. But again, it's just, I think that user tracking is like an additional layer on top of, obviously, you know, the other tools that we've spoken about.
Yeah, no, okay, good points there. Cool. Andrew, let's talk about social media, because I think, you know, the kind of metrics that are being produced now by the platforms is again really interesting. So how do you kind of decipher what's kind of good data, what's bad data? How do you make decisions from these, Andrew? Do you start with maybe Facebook and Instagram?
Yeah. I mean, I guess from Facebook and Instagram perspective, obviously there are some different tools out there from a reporting standpoint. The platforms themselves have a pretty kind of decent, robust reporting metrics on there. But obviously you can look at other tools like Hootsuite, Social Bakers, some of the bigger boys like Spreadfast, Meltwater, that can start to kind of really pull in some analytics. But it kind of all depends on what you're really kind of trying to do in that environment. So for example, obviously, typically in a Facebook and Instagram environment, people know, you know, the metrics of like, share, you know, comment. Obviously, they also on Facebook have increased some of those interactions, you know, happy face and all these kinds of things. So I think that, you know, that's fine to understand, and obviously views on posts and video views associated to that. The challenge that's presented on a Facebook and Instagram environment is organically, it's very difficult to try and understand where or why, what's working with this. So for example, obviously a lot of it is very visually driven. So is it the copy that's being created on there? Is it the type of content? Is it the length of content? Is it the style? Is it the tonality? All of these things have an impact on ultimately that data. So when you are looking in a Facebook environment, even you know, we get questions back as far as, well, you know, nobody's liked this, or nobody has kind of engaged with this particular piece of content, but ultimately that piece of content may have driven a lot of qualified traffic to the site. So I think that even in the Facebook and Instagram world, there's a difference between, you know, liking something, sharing something, commenting, and actually getting true value out of those metrics. So even, for example, in an Instagram world, when you kind of start to dig into quite interestingly influencers, the metrics, a lot of the time these influencers won't share their metrics. We're kind of dealing with an influencer in Saudi Arabia at the moment that flatly refused to kind of give access to views, to clicks. Just a very popular influencer, and kind of brands are lining up to hand over cash to be represented by that individual, and they're not providing any data. So I think at the moment, the data metrics, especially in that kind of Facebook and Instagram world, are very misunderstood. Okay, so in the sense, what does that data mean, and how does it translate to business? Now, obviously, organically, that's a challenge. When you're running ads across that platform, you are obviously able to dig into the data a bit more. So you may be running conversion ads, you may be running, you know, awareness ads, engagement ads, and ultimately they're delivering those to those specific audiences. So you can start to truly understand, obviously, you know, what is working, right? And similarly, you know, what happens usually in our world is we will, you know, run a whole bunch of kind of different ads to try and understand what people are engaging with, and then ultimately kind of nip them in and pull them in and change them as time goes on. But so from a Facebook and Instagram perspective, that's kind of really where it hits. Yeah.
No, I mean, it makes sense. I think it's funny though. There's a lot of people who still kind of hold success criteria based on those vanity likes and things like that. So I guess it's kind of understanding obviously the impact of those, because although they are very much vanity, you don't really know who's liking, and if you do, how many votes are really relevant. The fact that perhaps has an impact on whether somebody actually makes that mental decision to maybe watch something or view something on the back of seeing other people have liked it. I think there's definitely kind of something to that.
Yeah,
just before you answer that, sorry, 1 second. Yeah. Hey Heidi, I know you've got a question to ask. If you can put the question up on the chat, we'll tackle that the second we get a chance. Sorry, Andrew.
No worries. So I think there is a credibility play for sure. So, for example, if I see Instagram and I see Aston Martin that's running through, and I go to their page and they've got 100 fans, I might be thinking, well, hold on, is this legit? Is it a real Aston Martin page? Are they just kind of data mining? Where is that? So I think from a brand and personal perspective, there is a certain amount of vanity attached to that, and I think it can impact the decision as far as if people trust that environment. So it may not even be a brand new kind of company with no awareness. It may be a large organization that basically just has started their journey in social, and there is a real kind of I'd say charge from especially brands that are new to social. We've seen it during COVID where they haven't even touched it, and now they're jumping all over social. They do want to have some of that vanity metrics, and in all honesty, it does make sense. It's just trying to make sure that there isn't a direct line between how many people like your page and how much business that's going to generate. It's sometimes difficult. I guess the thing is, if we look at it like a restaurant, you walk past 5 restaurants in a row. If 2 of them are busy and 3 of them are empty, most likely you might go in the 2 busy ones because something's going on. The food must be good. I don't know what's wrong with these other ones. Unless you're very antisocial and you think, yeehaw, there's an empty restaurant, they're going to look after me. But most people, I think, would lean towards the busier places, perhaps not during COVID, but the busier places just to kind of, because there's other people there, right? And the same applies for social.
Yeah, no, that's a good point as well. All right, so if we look at it from a kind of LinkedIn perspective, Andrew, I think that those metrics are perhaps a little bit more different.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Because I think I look at LinkedIn in a slightly different way, but I'll maybe answer that.
No, you kick off then. Let's hear you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've done a lot on LinkedIn over the last maybe 6 months or so, more than ever. And I think again, if we're looking at sort of organic LinkedIn metrics, I think most analytics tools, whether you're using Google, whether you're using HubSpot, really does give you kind of, very kind of direct information as to whether someone's, come onto your website from LinkedIn. In the HubSpot world, we actually take that on a little bit further. So not only does it tell us how many people have come on from LinkedIn, but it actually then tells you how many leads were generated on the back of that, and then actually even goes one step further and tells you how much money you've made from that activity. So, but again, you can start to kind of connect those dots, and a lot of that, perhaps maybe not the revenue attribution side of it, but the rest of it, from maybe up to lead gen, you can kind of understand whether that's come and originated from LinkedIn. And it's funny because we've looked at the vanity aspects of LinkedIn. And I think we've actually discussed it on this show where, we've had so many people that have come to us and said, wow, you guys are all over LinkedIn. I've seen your content. I've read your articles. Yeah. And I know I've looked at them and I've said, we haven't liked any. Right? I mean, because again, and that's really interesting as well, right? Because I think the key is then, if people are going to see your content, and LinkedIn does give you more organic visibility than probably any other platform, I'd say, other than TikTok right now. So it's a really great place to get free visibility. right?
Yeah.
And free traffic. And especially if you create your own content, like what we do, we've spoken about this before on the show as well. But if you do create, you know, somewhere where someone can click on your LinkedIn post, go back onto your website, actually, I care for that, because if I can, you know, even if a post has got, I don't know, 20 likes, but actually I've seen that post has originated 80 visits to the website, that for me is an important metric, much more than the likes, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, because for me, now I know someone's been on my webpage, I can retarget them, I can communicate with them in other ways. But you know, for me, it's just far more important than people saying, hey, you know, like or clap and all that rubbish.
Clap. But celebrate is the word you're looking for. It's the green
clap,
hands,
isn't it? I know.
It's celebrate.
It's clap.
I'll know not to celebrate. I'll know not to celebrate your posts in future. That's fine. Do you not like the insightful one either? No.
Hate
Brilliant.
it.
I think you may have done that actually on a post that Dharmesh put up once, but I'll have to look back. You might have put. Yeah.
Might have been a post I also deleted afterwards.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, look, I similar to you. I think, you know, look, it's quite, because of basically these things. Anytime you put a post up on LinkedIn, you're constantly getting, you know, kind of alerted that someone's liked or shared or commented. I think, you know, the whole kind of LinkedIn environment from a metric perspective, it is interesting to see views, I think, video views especially, and there is different correlation between the time of day that you post and the day that you post and the consistency. And we know we've tested where we haven't posted anything for a couple of weeks, then we're posting every day, a couple of times a day, to kind of see how that algorithm works. And as you said, ours is more about, you know, encouraging people to see the content that we're producing. And I almost feel like, you know, the LinkedIn is effectively like a doorman, letting you into the club. And you know, basically you can give them a tip if you want, which might be a like or a celebrate or an insightful or a comment. But ultimately what you want to do is you want to get into the club. So I think the thing is that's why we have so many people that we talk to. Back to your scenario, which is, oh man, that was a phenomenal ebook. You know, Grow Show's phenomenal. You didn't share it, you didn't like it, you didn't comment on it. No, I know. Yeah. So I think the thing is that, as you said, you have to be careful with these metrics, and understand, you know, where it is. I mean, obviously, ultimately, it is about reach, but it's still, even though a B2B space, if you look at some of the really heightened engaged posts in the last, let's say, 3 months, they've been very emotionally driven. So even though it's kind of business as usual, a lot of the posts that have massive reach, massive engagement, have been emotionally driven. And that may be people changing careers, it may be people leaving posts over a long time, you know, or kind of powerful statements around you know, some of the kind of political situation that's kind of being pulled through as well. So
yeah, I feel as if they I mean, again, I don't want to spend too much on LinkedIn, but I think that is actually an algorithm change. You know, everyone's kind of feeling a little bit vulnerable at the moment, and if someone's showing that vulnerability in public, let's embrace that and let's support it. And I think what they've done is kind of humanize that algorithm right now, because I don't think it was like that before. And look, in all honesty, you know, anyone who's going through tough times, looking for a job, fully get it. But if 100%. In 2 years' time, if we're kind of beyond COVID and we're just trying to do business, and if I start to see those posts, it'll really put me off the platform, you know. And it's not being heartless or anything. It's just like, you know, I get it right now. I just won't get it if they continue to do that. And again, you know, likes and claps and stuff, right? So anyway, guys, thank you so much for questions. So we Asma, you sent a couple of questions. We'll come on to both of those. Actually, with Shopify one, I'll answer for you right now. And Asma's question is, how would you view Shopify as a tool for e-commerce? Very quick answer, absolutely love it. The analytics that you also get as part of that Shopify experience is fantastic. So again, some of these analytics and kind of key bits of data will be very helpful, and it will kind of maybe save a bit of time in going into some other tools as well. And then also,
I mean, just the Shopify ecosystem as well, Amit, is just full of additional tools for you to track things. So things like cart abandonment and kind of, that user journey to cart, retargeting. There's the whole ecosystem of Shopify is very easy, very plug and play.
Yeah, and it also integrates directly into HubSpot, which makes it even more powerful. So you end up basically having the capabilities of Amazon from a marketing perspective. I think that's probably the best part of it. And Majir's asked a question as well, Andrew. So I think more kind of personal, but again, it's about kind of revenue and how can revenue kind of be generated to his e-commerce platform through social media during this kind of COVID time. So I don't know, maybe a minute on that, Andrew, just to help Majir out.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can't see the question. So is it mentioned the what product it is, or? Yeah,
it's a boutique flower shop.
Boutique flower shop. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think look, from a social perspective, I guess the challenge still is that, generally speaking, people wouldn't necessarily go to Instagram to look for flowers. They may be inspired by it. They may be looking for hashtags, but they may not necessarily go in that space. But we can target on things like birthdays and anniversaries. So if you want to run some ads around and gifting as well, I think that's a good opportunity. And then I wouldn't ignore, the likes of Google, but not just things like, flower boutiques, flowers. Be a bit more specific in the audience that you want to go after. So kind of try to identify what's unique about your boutique flower shop. So what's the reason that people come back to you, time and time again, your real customers, and ultimately kind of start to go after them there. If you do have existing customers, and you've got, kind of mobile and email associated to them, use that list to kind of upload to Facebook and Instagram and Google to create lookalike audiences, and then ultimately start, running ads to those lookalike audiences, because these are people that have spent money with you previously. They look like those individuals, so I'd say there'd be a higher likelihood for those individuals to convert. And the other thing I'd say is,
Go on. No, I was going to say, go on, carry on, mate. We'll move on to the next part in a second.
Sure. The other thing I was going to say as well is just to make sure that, it's very easy to communicate with you. So, we actively encourage, even though you may be e-commerce, put your WhatsApp, for business on your Instagram, on your social media channels, put a kind of live chat or WhatsApp again on your site, so people can, potentially jump off and have a conversation. It's interesting the amount of e-commerce companies that we work with, where a lot of the time the transaction is actually, ultimately closed in a WhatsApp environment, and almost taken offline. So I think just make sure there's those different communication channels in place as well.
Cool, awesome. Thanks, Andrew. So look, I think you mentioned email, and I think that kind of moves us nicely onto that piece, because again, I think when we're having conversations regarding email strategy and digital marketing strategy as a whole, email is still so often overlooked as something that's powerful. And again, from our perspective, it's I quite like the fact that email is kind of underused today, because it means that there's perhaps more opportunities out there for email. But the days of how we used to kind of track email in terms of open rates and click-through rates, I think those days are also gone. And I think those metrics, and perhaps that's where these new metrics, I guess, come into play, but a lot of people don't know about the new metrics that are available, right?
Yeah, no, actually, it's interesting, usually when I kind of, people push back a bit and say, well, emails, are people really doing that? Are people, and I always ask them, I mean, what was the first thing you did in the office this morning then? Oh, I checked my email. Yeah, okay, cool. So it's definitely, it's lost its sex appeal as far as kind of, I want to jump on TikTok or Snap or kind of Insta, that's where I'm spending my time. But I think if you really kind of boiled down your day and saw the amount of time that you either spent Zooming or checking emails at the moment, you know, there's a large proportion of your time in that space, and I think it's vastly ignored across multiple sectors, different industries, B2B, B2C. It really is ignored at the moment, I say.
Yeah, and I think and again, we won't spend too much time on this, but again, guys, if you are thinking of running email campaigns or are running email campaigns, like I said, it's kind of gone beyond, okay, how many people have opened the email, how many people have clicked through to a link on email. The kind of data you get now is much richer in the sense of, now we can actually see things like, okay, people open the email, but how much time do they spend reading that email, right? Yeah. And then once you've got that kind of information, perhaps even click-through rates become a little bit less relevant, okay? Because you may have engaged somebody because they've read the whole email, because they've spent 15 seconds reading the email, but they haven't clicked on something. Well, that's okay. The fact that I know that I've engaged them, they've been interested enough to, you know, read beyond my subject line and maybe my first sentence, means that perhaps I can engage them with some more content now. And perhaps next time they'll click through. And I think that's important. And actually, from a metrics perspective, I think that actually makes almost more sense. And I think the other role of email now is in that kind of nurturing cycle. So again, you know, it's kind of not just about sending mass mails out and, you know, one message to all. Today, I think the fact that you can personalize email content, make it very relevant to the people who receive it, you know, so that they understand that you know, understand their business. In some respects.
I mean,
I think it just has a massive impact.
I think customizing, you know, lists, customizing communication, highly personalizing. It's not the, hey there, hello, Mr. Andrew. It's not that anymore, right? These tools have evolved. So you're able to target individuals with the right kind of content based on, again, the data that has been presented to you. If there's highly engaged individuals, even if they're sharing, for example, you know, if you see a mail that's been opened 20 times, the likelihood is, if it's a marketing email, that somebody's been forwarding that on. So there's definitely, you know, data that you can use to understand. Most of these platforms have heat maps on here now, so you can see, okay, that content that was there, what was engaged in that content. Did somebody look at a video? Did they scroll all the way to the bottom? You see the devices similar to kind of Google Analytics, where you can start to understand, you know, of my database, 90% of my audience is reading on a screen this size. So perhaps I ought to think about what that headline is, or perhaps I ought to kind of condense, you know, the text and make it more visual. These kind of data points help us understand how to ultimately personalize the experience, right? And start to look at metrics properly. Because that data is there, as you mentioned. And then ultimately taking it one step further, like you said, with the nurturing. So even based on how they're reacting to that email, they may not be opening those emails. So we have the ability to understand that and then send them another email with a different type of content, a different subject line, you know, start to do a bit of A/B testing on there as well.
Yeah, and one of the other, I think the last point on email is unsubscribe rates. Because again, I've been in meetings where people have said, you know, this email was you know, bad because we had a slightly higher rate of you know, unsubscribes than we normally have. I was like, well, maybe that was good, right? Because what you're now doing is kind of qualifying your audience a little bit more.
That's
and,
right.
you know, and the fact is that, okay, you've had an extra, you know, X number of people who've unsubscribed. Great. I mean, you know, disengaged. You don't have to waste your time with them anymore. Exactly. You know, you're not going to have that data that's going to skew the other data, right? Because if they weren't opening emails in the first place, that has an impact on your open rates, has, you know, an impact potentially on click-through rates, you know, so kind of fine. Again, then, you know, and I say to people, don't obsess about that. And in fact, you know, I get more worried if we send emails out and there aren't unsubscribes in some respects, because it means, okay, have people really kind of engaged with what we're saying.
Yeah.
You know, I'd rather have almost like a, I don't know, yes or a no, rather than, you know, a maybe. Almost in some respects.
That's right. Yeah.
And then, so I think email is interesting. If you're not using email, use email, I think is the bottom line of that. And use the metrics. And then finally, Andrew, I think, you know, what I want to look at is search. We've had a question also from Asma when it comes to kind of search and SEO. Asma, go back and watch our SEO episode if you haven't, because that was awesome. And honestly, it was like there's a lot of new data and stuff that we're sharing in that, which we've heard a lot of positive feedback from actually. So definitely go back and watch that. It was, I think, a couple of episodes ago. But with SEO, like I said, we've mentioned Google Search Console, which I think is probably the #1 kind of free SEO tool that you could use.
Yeah.
But there's a whole load of other stuff. The one that I like a lot is something called Ubersuggest, and it's by a guy called Neil Patel. And if you've done any kind of digital marketing searches in your life, you'd have come across this guy for sure.
Yeah.
And he's got his own SEO tool, which is called Ubersuggest. Google that and play around with that, because again, what that starts to tell you is really how your website is performing, where it's ranking, how much traffic, and things like that. But again, just to refer back to that show a couple of weeks ago, Andrew, the key metrics that we focus on from a search perspective aren't your traditional metrics, right? So it's not things like how many of my keywords are ranking #1, because again, the impact of that could be 100 or it could be 0. You could be ranking really well for keywords that are completely irrelevant and nobody's ever searching for them anyway. So we don't look at stuff like that. But what we focus on more, and again, I would urge all of you guys to focus on more, is things like search visibility. So how visible are you for all the different keywords in your industry that are relevant to your business, right? So, and if that's 1,000 keywords, it's 1,000 keywords, but how visible are you? And we've got a tool where we basically put a percentage figure based on an algorithm, based on a formula, which tells you exactly what your visibility is. And if you start to kind of really measure that metric, that's important, because that means that anybody who's out there searching for your business, you'll start to understand how visible you are in that search, right? And if you are visible in that search, you've obviously got a much higher chance of winning that business compared to someone else, right? The second metric we look at is search visibility against your competitors. So great, we've got search visibility. And if we've got a search visibility of 50, but my competitor has a search visibility of 80, well, actually, now I've got some context, right? And that means that we've got to work much harder, because there's a much better chance that my competitor is going to get the traffic, the leads, and the business compared to me. Two very, very important metrics. And that context piece actually is really kind of critical. Conversely, if you've got search visibility of 50 and your competitor has 5% search visibility, great, right? Again, how do you then use that data to actually build an even bigger gap between yourself and that company, right? Which is basically that search engine ownership piece. The third metric, Andrew, do you want to share what that is?
No, I don't know what it is. What's the third metric?
Andrew, you should go back and watch our SEO show we did a couple of weeks back. It was awesome.
Yeah, I will do. I thought you were on a roll. I've actually
I was, but I
turned on to. I'm thinking about something else at the moment around basics, and you throw me.
Amazing. So the third metric to help Andrew out is the value of the organic traffic. That search is bringing to your site. So, guys, if we all rely on Google to generate traffic for our business, there's two ways of generating traffic on Google. One is through paid means, and one is through free organic means, right? Now, if we were in a situation where our website wasn't visible, wasn't ranking, we weren't generating any organic traffic, we'd essentially have no alternative but to then pay Google for some ads, right? Yeah. Now, one of the metrics that we really kind of recommend for anyone who's serious about search and search visibility for their website is to understand, okay, if I didn't have any organic traffic, how much would I have to pay Google to obtain the traffic that I need, right? Or conversely, if I'm getting 5,000 visits today on my website organically through Google, how much would I have to pay Google for that same traffic if I wasn't getting any, right? And so you can start to kind of understand this. And Google are very helpful because they tell you, right, a cost per click for your industry across these number of keywords is going to cost $5. And very simply, you've then got a formula where you can say, right, okay, it's $5 per click. I need 5,000 visits, and therefore now I've got to spend $25,000 to get essentially the same level of traffic that I get for free. And for me, that's a much more important metric than how many keywords are ranking at number one, right? Because if you understand the value of what's being generated organically for free, that gives you an opportunity to say, right, this is now potentially saving me $25,000 a month in advertising that I would otherwise need to spend. But then you can also look at it and say, okay, well, if I actually, improved my website, if I created more content, if I did some kind of, cool SEO things, which might cost me, I don't know, $5,000 a month, well, actually, will my 25,000 suddenly turn into $50,000 worth of traffic?
Yeah.
And actually, that's the model we've built out. And does it work? Like, hell yeah, right? It's amazing. So again, these are the kinds of metrics that you really got to focus on in the search world. So, but again, you've got to understand where you are, and that data that you can use can come from things like Ubersuggest. Moz has some free tools. That's MOZ. SEMrush is another one. SEO Quake is another one. Again, these will kind of give you some insights as to, what needs to be done, how you kind of stand right now. But really, once you start actually looking at search as a real kind of strategy for your business, that's when you really kind of need to look at search visibility, how your competitors are faring against you, and then really what the value of that is. So, so I guess that's kind of it from that part. Andrew, we kind of over time. I never thought we'd do an hour today. Honestly, I know. I was telling you, I was like, this is like a 10-minute show.
That we were going to blow through. Like I even said at the beginning of the thing, it's a big topic. It's a huge topic. To try and race through kind of all of those different metrics is tough.
No, I know some people will have 4 o'clock meetings or 1 o'clock meetings if you're in the UK, but I think just a couple of minutes, just because it is important. The impact of the funnel, when it comes to understanding metrics, is also quite important, guys. So one really kind of good way is to even break down your kind of CRM at any point, especially if you're B2B. And you can, we kind of visually sometimes draw out a funnel, right, for our clients and say, right, here's a funnel, and here's how much business or how many leads you've got at this stage, and this is how much it's worth. If you get it through to the next stage, this is what's currently there. And if you start to kind of apply some of these metrics back into that funnel, actually, if you've got to display or if you've got to present this data to anybody within your organization, it's much easier to kind of understand and sort of comprehend, right? And I think that's quite an important point. And then the last piece, I guess, Andrew, is kind of revenue attribution. Do you want to kind of talk about that for a second or two?
Yeah, I mean, I think just before that, obviously, I mean, as far as that visual format, it's crucial to understanding. And what we've spoken about a lot of is kind of historical data and looking at data and what does it mean. But ultimately, when we talk about the funnel, we're talking about forecasting. So okay, I've done this to do X. What more do I need to do to get more of Y, right? So I think the thing is that piece is super important. Yeah, I mean, to kind of just, I guess, really kind of touch at the end here. We've obviously got some tools in place through HubSpot that allows us to kind of start looking at revenue attribution. So on the back of some of the activity that we've done, so that may be increased blogs, it may be this show, for example, it could be a podcast. HubSpot now has the ability to track the impact of kind of revenue associated to this, because we are tracking the entire customer journey from initial prospecting, and that prospecting may, for example, be signing up to this show to watch the show, to ultimately then some of you guys and some of your customers actually who are watching, and then ultimately, people that are listening to us now and potentially down the road become a customer of ours as well. So I think that revenue attribution piece, I think, is relatively new in a simplified format. So previously, obviously, you were able to kind of dig into the numbers a bit and understand, well, okay, let's say, for example, we were tracking one of our blogs, which was generating revenue for us. How much does a website cost, right? For example. we were able to draw a line back tentatively to that article when somebody originally, that was their first point of contact with Nexa. Now HubSpot has the tools that's kind of taken on that head on, and ultimately kind of, you know, really simplified that. So we know, for example, how much revenue has been attributed to this show, just this page on this show.
Yeah, and I think that's a really kind of key point, because I think what happens otherwise is people kind of engage in an activity, but not really sure whether it's had an impact, it's not sure if it's worked. Right, exactly, and you know, they move on to the next thing when actually the thing they were doing was super successful, right? And we've seen that a number of times. Actually, we've been hurt by that. With clients, you know, we've been convinced that we can attribute revenue for a client, but client's not seen it. And then they've deleted a year's worth of work, and we've gone back and said, wow, you know, that's because again, we understood the numbers, but perhaps whoever was, you know, right at the top of that food chain perhaps didn't. And, you know, and we've seen people literally get rid of 15,000 website visits a month that were generating revenue because they didn't understand it, you know, and it's like, okay, so it's organic visits.
Watch next week and we'll name and shame.
Yeah, I was tempted to there actually. But there we go. But I think that's I think that's it, mate. I think look, five past the hour, so we're a little bit over time, guys. Yeah, thank you so much for joining today. Thanks for your questions. Andrew didn't see any of those questions as he mentioned earlier, but I did, and I appreciate those coming in. Andrew, podcast, YouTube, do you want to kind of
so we're up and running. We don't it's something actually we probably need to talk about a bit more, but we basically now we strip out the audio, we put this on Anchor, which gets distributed across Apple Podcasts and kind of all the other podcast networks, so you can just kind of, you know, look for that. It's the Digital Growth Show, so we're starting to see more people listening to that if you don't get an opportunity to. And we're obviously now, we've started to upload all of the shows into YouTube as well. So if you want to catch that later, or you're watching it later, it's now on YouTube. If you're over there, give us a subscribe on kind of YouTube and Apple as well, or kind of Android. That'd be cool. But yeah, as always, if you want to reach out to us directly, Amit and I are there on LinkedIn, as we mentioned. That's kind of probably the most active platforms that we're on from a social perspective. You can jump on and have a conversation with us. Obviously, you know, head over to digitalnexa.com and kind of reach out to us directly. We'd be happy to have a chat with anyone.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time, and thanks for watching, and we'll catch you again next week.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I'm going to give it a double wave, I think, today.
A double wave. I'm going to wave because waving's all right. Listen, if you guys came across that article where it said don't wave on Zoom, ignore it. We'll
make sure you wave aggressively.
Yeah, wave.
All right, wave.
It's fine. It's fine.
See you later, guys. Have a good week. Bye.